bilingual language policy in Welcome to the webinar on bilingual language policy in the Philippines. This webinar was made possible by the cooperation between the Ministry of Education in Taiwan Center for Research on Bilingual Education at National Taipei University of Education and Angeles University Foundation in Philippines. My name is Jane Chen, and I'm the director of the Center for Research on Bilingual Education at National Taipei University of Education. I would like to acknowledge the attendance of our partners from Angeles University Foundation Philippines, Dr. Elvira Bolinas, Dean of Graduate School, Dr. Durant Tayag, Program Chair of Teacher Education, and today's speaker, Professor Remy Tulabut. Let's welcome them.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Professor Talabut is an assistant professor at the College of Education and currently the head of the English department. She has conducted training and seminars for teachers both in the basic and tertiary level. She has also presented research papers both in the Philippines and international conferences. Her research interest includes English language teaching and strategies, distance education, and error analysis. Please join me in welcoming Professor Remy Talabut.
Thank you, Dr. Chen.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll share my screen.
Okay, let me stop sharing.
So, do you see my screen now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. I'd like to express my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Jane Chen for inviting us to do this webinar with you. Um, I also would like to express my sincerest thanks to Michelle for helping me from day one of this webinar preparation. Sorry. Actually, we met yesterday to do a walkthrough of the slides and the program, and I asked some tips from her. So for today's webinar, we have some house rules that we have to observe um, for a period of at least an hour. So please mute your mic if you are not speaking, because it would result to some unnecessary feedback. Second, please, we will allow the host to record the session. Actually, they have started the recording the moment we began the webinar. Third, you can turn on the closed caption button on your Google Meet and enable the Chinese translation. So this is specially requested so that our Chinese audience would be able to read the Chinese translation in their Google Meet link. And then you can use the raise hand button if you are experiencing technical issues. So I think the technical committee can assist you should you have any technical problems. And then you can use the chat box to ask questions later on. So you can see all of these buttons uh, on your screen. So please feel free to use the chat box if you have questions later on, or comments, or if you want to share some experience as well. Uh, we are free to use the chat box. Okay. So I think we are ready to begin. So good morning, everyone, to our participants, the high school teachers, the elementary school teachers, as well as the pre-service teachers in National Taipei University of Education. Okay, so before we begin, I'd like to ask you first, how do you feel today? You know, because of pandemic, we become a little bit isolated to other people. So I'd like to ask you, how do you feel today? So I'd like you to use the chat box in giving me your answer. Okay, so you can type A if you're excited, B if you're feeling happy today, C if you're feeling healthy, or D if you're feeling curious. Okay, so please type your answers. All right, so I see D, D, C, B. Okay, B, happy. C, wow, A, B, C, D, all of the above. All right, so thank you. So majority of the participants are feeling curious about the bilingual policy in the Philippines. Um, I saw some feeling healthy. I hope many of you feel healthy today and excited as well. Okay, so thank you for all your responses. I can close my chat box now. Right. Okay, so for today's topic, we will talk about bilingual language policy, the case of the Philippines. I'd like to share with you our experience as regards the implementation of the bilingual language policy. Um, I wanted to be as honest as possible. So I even included some of the challenges that we encountered in implementing the bilingual policy in the Philippines. As you see in the picture, there are two students writing something. The girl thinks in English. You see words like matches, opinion, faucet, beautiful, chair, and pure, whereas the boy um, thinks in Filipino, and those are actually the translation of the words in Filipino. Matches, posporo, opinion, pakiwari, faucet, gripo, beautiful, marikit, and so on and so forth. So these are the topics that we will talk about today. I'd like to provide you a brief background about the Philippines and how we were able to uh, come with come up with the policy. Okay. And then second, we will talk about the two emerging policies, language policies in the Philippines, the bilingual education policy and the mother tongue based multilingual education. So the mother tongue based multilingual is the new policy that we have since 2012. It's not new, but it's actually the recent. Okay, so to provide you a background about the Philippines, when we speak of the political aspect of of our country, so the Philippines is composed of 81 provinces. So you know exactly where Philippines is because we are actually neighbors. It's composed of 17 regions and an addition of one region in 2017, making it 18 in total. So from Luzon up to the southern tip of the Philippines. So we have 18 regions and we have 145 cities with a total of 109 plus million population as of 2020. So if we will count went up to 2021, so maybe we are still more than 109 million. Okay. So linguistically speaking, the Philippines has 171 living languages spoken by different ethno-linguistic groups. So these 171 languages are too many with the small country we have. From the 171, we have 8 major languages. We call them major languages, or they were considered major languages because they have the greatest number of speakers. Okay, so we have Bicol. Bicol is in the Visayan region here. We have Cebuano here, Hiligaynon. So we have this part. Okay, Ilocano in the northern part. Kapampangan is here. By the way, I am a native Kapampangan speaker. So I live here in this brown region. All of us. Okay, the team, the AUF team. We also have Pangasinan here, Tagalog region, somewhere here in the middle, and Waray, those in Mindanao, the southern part of the Philippines. So these are the 8 major languages in our country. So let's try to look at the following sample. If you would like to say good morning in Philippine languages, you have to say it in different accent and different vocabulary. So, for example, in Tagalog, we say magandang umaga. In Ilocano, naimbag abigat. Kapampangan, that's my language, mayap aabak. Cebuano, maayong buntag. Ibanag, mapia nga umanikaw. Ilonggo, maayong aga. The very popular expression, I love you. So probably because we have a lot of Filipino overseas workers in Taiwan, you have heard them saying, I love you. And you heard them saying, mahal kita or mahal kita.
Oh, this
or,
is important.
or sometimes they would say, iniibig kita. Iniibig kita is more poetic, more formal than mahal kita. But they're actually from Tagalog region. In Ilocano, they say, ay ayaten ka. Kapampangan, kaluguran da ka. Cebuano, nahigugma ko nimo. Ibanag, idutaka. Ilonggo, palanga, tagit ka. So imagine these are only six. No, I'm sorry. I only speak Tagalog and Kapampangan. um, I wish I could because but we don't have so much exposure to the other languages. If you have to speak to the different representatives, the ethno-linguistic representatives in the Philippines, so you would hear 170 versions of "I love you," and it's going to be chaotic if you would, have to speak to all of these 170 representatives, and so from these 170 languages, there's actually a need for us to come up with one language which will bind us all together. And that is why we have the national language. Okay. Historically speaking, okay, the Philippines was colonized by the Spaniards for more than 300 years. At the time, the lingua franca was Spanish. But the Spaniards did not teach their language to all of the Filipinos. They only taught it to the elite or those who are in the high social status. So the rich people were able to learn Spanish because they can afford to study abroad and in some exclusive schools in the Philippines. But the common Filipinos did not learn Spanish, and the Spanish priest actually and intentionally learned the language of the locals so that they could convert them to Christian or Christianity. They would like to spread their religion in an easy way. Therefore, to reach out to the locals, they have to speak with them in the language that the locals are familiar with. And so Filipinos did not learn Spanish. But surprisingly, our language is actually composed of many of our vocabulary words are Spanish in origin, but we cannot converse in Spanish. But I remember we studied Spanish in school, but it wasn't enough for us to communicate in Spanish. After the Spaniards, we have the Americans. So the Americans colonized the Philippines for 44 years. But the Americans shared with us their language. So the lingua franca during the colonization was English. Um, there was this free public school education offered by the American teachers. So it was compulsory that all children will have to attend free public school so that they will learn the language. Okay. On, American teachers arrived to teach the English language. So the media of instruction in schools were in English. Teachers were trained to teach English, and the instructional materials were all in English. Therefore, we could say that the Americans were actually successful in promoting their language and their culture to the Philippines. That's why I'm here today speaking about our experience. Otherwise, uh, I would be using Filipino in conducting webinars. So in 1930s, even then the Americans are still at the time in the Philippines. Some Filipino groups showed acts of resistance against the Americans. So in 1930, there was a need for us to have a national language for the to show political independence from the Americans. We would like to have our own independence. And so the goal to have a national language would not actually remove English as our official language, but to have a unified or a unifying language for all the Filipinos, or a language that will represent the Filipino people. So in 1937, an Executive Order 134 proclaimed the adoption, development, and use of national language. Executive order is issued by the president. And so the president tasked the National Language Institute to, to select among the 170 languages which one could be the national language of the Philippines. And so among the 170, the Institute recommended Tagalog. Of course, Tagalog is in the center, the language of the where the seat of government is. Okay, so it's very convenient for them to choose Tagalog. However, some ethno-linguistic groups did not accept the choice. They said, "Why Tagalog of all languages? Why not our language?" Because you cannot, uh, you cannot, we cannot we have to understand where they're coming from, because each group is represented by a certain language. So most probably even the Kapampangans actually felt that Kapampangan should be the language. Yes, between the eight major languages. But the Cebuanos also complained about it, and some of the linguistic groups in the country. And then in 1959, Tagalog was renamed as Filipino. And so Filipino this time does not represent any linguistic group. Okay, it does not represent any region. And so to stop the clamor, so Tagalog was changed to Filipino, but it's letter P, Filipino, because that was the original alphabet that we have. We don't have letter F yet, so it's Filipino. So Filipino was declared as the official name of the national language, declared through Department Order 37. And so from that point onwards, Filipino is the national language and English is our co-official language. So we now recognize two official languages in our country. But then the problem is, how do we make these two languages popular, or how do we make people be familiarized with Filipino language, being it a new language to the country? Um, they have to introduce, they have to implement, they have to teach every Filipino people how to speak Tagalog, or how to speak the Filipino language. And so in the education sector, they passed the bilingual education policy through the Department Order number 25, Series 1974, titled Implementing Guidelines for the Policy on Bilingual Education. So this was the time when the two languages were recognized, and that they have to be taught in the classroom. Okay, so they have to be introduced to the children. They have to learn how to speak Filipino, not just English language. So the guideline states that English is used as medium of instruction for science and mathematics, and the use of Filipino as medium of instruction for all other subjects in the elementary and high school levels. So the 1974 guidelines is only applicable up to high school level. So which means after high school, uh, there's nothing more. I mean, we don't have any more policy covering bilingual education. Um, and English is specifically allotted for science and math, whereas other subjects are taught in the Filipino language. Okay, it's a very clear distinction as to when we will use English and when we will use Filipino. Okay, there's no overlapping of language. Like, can I use English here or can I use Filipino in this subject? No, it's English is for science and math. That's the exclusive language for science and math, and Filipino for all the other subjects in the um, elementary and high school levels. So operationally, we will define bilingual education in the Philippines as the separate use of Filipino and English as the media of instruction in specific subject areas. So the definition given in the guidelines is exactly what the guidelines is about. So there is a separate use of the two languages, and the subject areas are specified as well, so there will be no confusion as to what language should you use in teaching this particular subject. When the Constitution in 1987 was created, okay, after the martial law, the bilingual education policy was ratified. It was ratified because up to that time, still there is a problem with the national language. There's still an issue on the national language. So the Department Order 52 series of 1987 finally declared Filipino with an F, not Filipino anymore, but with an F as the official language of the Philippines. This Filipino is said to be less regionalistic, okay, and less connected to the Tagalog region. And in the Constitution as well, the Filipino language was to be developed from all local languages in the Philippines. So it does not represent any particular region, but it has to be a compilation, okay, uh, of all the languages in the Philippines. And of course, English as provided by law, because we already have set what the role of English in our society. It's also important that in 1987 bilingual education policy, they have recognized the inclusion of the regional languages as auxiliary official languages. So this is giving recognition that Philippines is actually a multilingual society. So for those who do not have background yet in Filipino language, they may use the regional language as their official language. Um, and then there should be a transition to Filipino language later on. The 1987 policy on bilingual education is actually recognized as one of the earliest comprehensive bilingual education experiments in the world. So I'm not sure if we were the first, but in Asia, definitely we are the first to implement a bilingual education, and it's still uh, being implemented even up to this day. So from 1987, it's 2021, so we still have the bilingual education policy. Okay, so what are the targets? So these are the following aims of the bilingual education. The first one is the achievement of competence in both Filipino and English at the national level. And it has to be used as the media of instruction at all levels. Remember in the 1974 guidelines, the use of Filipino and English was up to high school, okay, as media of instruction. But in 1987, they made it up to the tertiary level. So which means from elementary, high school, and to college or university level. So the bilingual education is being implemented or has to be implemented. The ultimate goal is to achieve competence in the two languages, not only in English, but likewise in Filipino. Um, as you saw from the slides that I have presented, majority of the subjects were offered or were taught in Filipino language because we would like to strengthen the Filipino language as much as we have strengthened the English language in our curriculum or in our education. The second is the use of the regional languages, and the third one is in order for the Filipino people to perform their functions and duties as Filipino citizens, and in English to meet the needs of the country in the community of nations. In other words, okay, we use English to stay connected it to the world, and we use Filipino language to strengthen our Filipino identity. We are Filipinos because we use Filipino language. So we will be called forever Filipino because we speak the Filipino language. Despite that, we have English as our another official language. And in particular, these are the functions of Filipino language in the society. Number one, this should be the language of literacy. It's important and it's the primary concern, primary importance, okay, that all Filipinos should be able to read and write in Filipino. They may not be competent enough in English, but at least they have to be able to read and write. So there's no excuse that they cannot read in Filipino because it's being taught from grade one. Okay, so every when they turn on their TV, they hear Filipino language being used in mass media. So this becomes our language of literacy. The second, the Filipino language becomes the linguistic symbol of national identity and unity. Okay, we become one because of our Filipino language. And the language of scholarly discourse in the intellectualization of the language. Since Filipino at the time was a newly introduced language, so it's not yet standard. Okay, so they have to work on the standardization or the intellectualization of the language. So part of intellectualizing it is to use it in scholarly discourse, in official transactions, communications, in research. I think UP, University of the Philippines, uh, prefer to use Filipino language over English in many of their communications. And so they actually helped in the intellectualization of the language. And English, again, this is the international language. This would become and will always be the international language and the non-exclusive language of science and technology. Okay, this is the function of English in general. Okay, but in the classroom, this will be the language or the medium of instruction in teaching science and mathematics. So how do we implement the bilingual education? So we begin in the early childhood education. So as I mentioned, it's across all levels. So from the early childhood education or preschool, um, English and Filipino are already used as medium of instruction. So as early as 5 years old, children are already taught using the two languages as media of instruction. The goal is for them to produce childhood bilingualism through classroom activities. So the teacher would use English, okay, as much as possible so that the students would be they would be able to develop bilingualism. Okay, for areas where Tagalog is not spoken or children whose native language is not Tagalog, teachers are allowed to translate Filipino and English words in the local language. As I mentioned, regional languages becomes auxiliary official language. So the teachers can use the local language in teaching early childhood. They translate. It's going to be too much effort, but it's the way of it's the only way the teachers could introduce the language. So they begin from the local language and later on transition to Filipino and English. It's better than teaching nothing at all, right? And children are also expected or they're allowed to answer in mixed language. So if they are already familiar with Filipino, they can use Filipino language. And if there are some words that they do not know in Filipino, so they can mix it up with their local language. So code mixing. In the primary grades, this is how Filipino is used in the classroom. So majority of the subjects taught in the primary grades are um, taught in Filipino language. So you have civics and culture. That's actually the English translation. But in the classroom, it's Civica at Cultura. That's the subject. It's Filipino subject. It's taught in Filipino from grades 1 to 3. So from grades 4 to 6, the civics and culture will be changed to geography, history, and civics. Or in our term, we call it HEKASI, Heograpiya, Kasaysayan, at Civica. Okay, that's our term, HEKASI. um, then, Makabayan, which includes character education, music, arts, and physical education. This subject is taught from grades 1 to 6, also in Filipino. And we have home economics and livelihood education, or the EPP, Edukasyong Pantahanan at Pangkabuhayan, in grades 4 to 6. So in the bilingual education policy, these subjects are taught using Filipino as the medium of instruction. But some in some private schools, they use English textbooks. uh, that's why they shift to English, because they're private schools, so they have they can choose the instructional materials that they want. But in the public school, they follow as what the guidelines is telling us to do. Children learn mathematics from grades 1 to 6 and science from grades 3 to 6 in English. So the textbooks in public and private are written in English, and therefore the teachers must teach the subjects in English. Although there could be some translation that may happen in case the students do not understand, but generally the medium of instruction is in English. And then we also have language subjects in Filipino and English. For English, we have two separate subjects teaching the language itself. We have reading and language. Okay. For language, this is all about grammar, the grammar of English. And for reading, it's the reading subject integrates the other language skills. So you begin with reading, then you have writing, speaking, and listening. But the topics coincide together. So when the teacher would teach sentence um, structure in the language subject, so the same task that will be done in the reading subject. So when they are in writing paragraph in language class, so the teacher expect that the students can write paragraph as an output to their reading task. So the same with Filipino subject. There's a separate subject teaching the language itself, apart from it being used as the medium of instruction. So in summary, we could see that English and Filipino are both used as medium of instruction. For English, science and math, for science and mathematics, they're being taught in English. For all other subjects, Filipino is used. There's also the language subjects, okay, to achieve bilingual competence. And the inclusion of regional languages as auxiliary language, as initial language for literacy in some areas where Tagalog or Filipino language is not yet familiar or accessible. So in the primary grades, teachers uh, shared their observations. Okay, the teachers who used Filipino as their medium of instruction, so they believe that the use of Filipino promotes oneness in thoughts as nation and pride, and it preserves the cultural and national identity of the Filipinos. It also promotes the development of reading skills, okay, because Filipino is the language of mass media. So when children would turn on their TV and would like to watch drama series, so they hear they get familiarized with the Filipino language. So Filipino language is accessible as well for the Filipino children, and children were observed to learn Filipino easier because even then that our language sound different. Our languages in the Philippines sound different. We have similarity. We still have some similarity as regards to the orthography. Okay, so we have the same spelling system. We do the syllabication when we spell, and so they found this similarity beneficial for the students to learn Filipino language. On the other hand, English is supported by most teachers and parents. I think even in Taiwan, I believe that parents support their children's uh, desire to learn English because there's really a need to learn English, especially in this globalization era that we have. Early exposure of children to sounds of English language promoted familiarization. So the earliest time that we exposed children to the sounds of English, so the better they will learn English. So which means as early as 5 years old, children are already introduced the English language in the classroom, okay, because they believe that this will promote familiarization and later on will lead to acquisition. Um, the English language is enhanced by educational programs in radio, television, and print materials, which were widely present in many environments. So everywhere you go, you could see signages written in English. When you turn on your TV, you could hear English words being used by news anchor, um, TV host, or any program that you would like to watch. When you turn on your radio, you hear English songs. So English is everywhere. So there's no excuse that you have no access to English language. Okay. And in the classroom, there are more reading materials in English, more than in Filipino and in different learning areas. I'm not sure if that is good, but probably if we wanted our children to learn English, that is good. Okay. That's positive, but the teachers are also working very hard to produce the same amount of reading materials in Filipino. In fact, some stories in English were translated in Filipino so that children would also develop love for reading in Filipino. Okay. uh, the the education sector did a very good job in implementing the bilingual education, but other stakeholders in the society also participated in the implementation of the bilingual policy. In fact, the government even passed this executive order number 335, which will help strengthen the use of Filipino language. Why just Filipino? Because for the longest time, we've been using English. The government used English in all of its transactions. So it's about time that they have to shift or to give attention to the Filipino language so that there will be a balance in terms of the amount of um, importance given to these two languages. So the government use Filipino in official transactions, communications, and correspondence in national or local level. The reason for this is that the government would want the Filipino people to appreciate all of the government projects, government programs when they are stated in the language that they are familiar with. Sometimes, no matter how grand or how promising the project is, if the Filipino people do not understand what the project is about because it's in English, okay, they would not appreciate its beauty. But if it's written in Filipino language, it's the language that's common, that's easy, that's familiar to them, then they would support the government programs. So this is a way for the government to reach out to the Filipino people in terms of their projects and programs. Another is that they also translated their offices names in Filipino, the buildings, the signboards with English translation below. Originally, they were named in English, but then there was a change. So the Filipino comes first, the Filipino name comes first, and the English translation is imprinted in small letters below the Filipino name of that office or building, etc. So this is how the government supported the bilingual education in their own workstation, okay, workplace. The higher education also had its involvement. As I mentioned, the 1987 bilingual education is across all levels, so from elementary to the tertiary level. So in the higher education, they were actually in charge in the intellectualization of the Filipino language. That is their ultimate task stated in the 1987 policy. The Commission on Higher Education updated the general education curriculum, okay, so that it would be aligned to the bilingual education policy. Language courses in the college level were also offered, um, whether in Filipino or English. I remember when I was in college, not too long ago, but long ago, probably how many years? 19 years, almost 20 years. So I remember we had English 1, English 2, English 3, and English 4. We also have Filipino 1, Filipino 2, Filipino 3, and Filipino 4 subject. The general education subjects were taught from first year to second year. And by third year, we will all take major subjects. So, for example, I majored English, so most of the subjects I will take when I reach third year will all be about my specialization. But the first year and second year are all general education subjects. So all students in the university, regardless of their course, their major, will have to take the general education courses. Okay. um, and if you fail, let's say you fail your Filipino 1, you cannot graduate because it's part of the curriculum. So you have to take it. You have to take it seriously, even it is a general education subject. We also had literature subjects. I remember we had Philippine literature and world literature. They may be taught in English or Filipino or any other language upon the discretion of the higher education institution for as long as materials are available. So in our case, our literature classes were taught in English. By the way, Dr. Balinas was my professor in English 4. That's a revelation. Uh, so literature subjects were taught in either Filipino or English. So humanities and social sciences courses are preferably taught in Filipino. Okay, preferably. So which means, uh, you know, as much as possible, they have to be taught in Filipino. But because the textbooks are in English, teachers would sometimes use English language. But there's nothing wrong if you use English. But in uh, the policy states preferably not required to use Filipino. But recently, there was a change in the general education curriculum in the higher education because of the K to 12 basic education program. So in 2012, the Department of Education implemented the K to 12. Originally, the Philippines only have 10 years of basic education. So we have 6 years of elementary and 4 years in high school. But in the K to 12, there was an addition of 2 more years. So we got senior high school. And so the subjects that we have in the college, the general education subjects, the English, Filipino, literature, humanities, and social sciences, were all moved down to the senior high school. So the senior high school becomes like our first year and second year college in the old days. Okay, in the previous curriculum that we have. Um, the the commission replaced the old general education courses into a new set of curriculum. Still, although they may have changed, the policy did not change at all. The subjects will still be taught either in Filipino or English. Actually, it's based on the recommendation of the university if they would choose to offer the Filipino version of the new curriculum or the English version of the new curriculum. And I was very fortunate that I was part of the training in the English curriculum. Um, there were actually two groups of teachers who attended the training, the Filipino teachers and the English teachers. So they are taught the same content, the same subject, except the language is different. So which means if ever that's the school would choose to offer the subject in Filipino, then the Filipino department will handle the course. Training was given to them. Okay. If the university would choose to teach the subjects in English, then in our case, the English department will handle the English subjects. So there was a change, but still the policy is the same. So we still apply the same policy in teaching the general education courses. Okay, the teachers actually have a very difficult task in this policy because how successful or how uh, unsuccessful the program will be sometimes depends on how the teacher implement it in the classroom. So if the teacher would take it seriously, then most probably we will have a very successful bilingual education. That's why I said they have the most difficult task. Okay, the burden is actually on their part. Um, when we say teachers, there are some expectations of them. So number one, the teacher should speak the local language in teaching non-Tagalog speaking children. Since part of the provision of the policy is the use of the regional languages, so teacher cannot insist to use Filipino or English if the students are not familiar, okay, to those languages. The teacher must use the language of the learners in order to teach what she needed to teach. Number two, teach subjects in Filipino or English as medium of instruction. Number three, teach English and Filipino as language subjects to promote bilingual competence. It's important that if you are the teacher in English language, you have to display competency. Um, you have to show proficiency, and because you are the model in the classroom, so you have to show competency um, in using the language, whether it's Filipino or English. Okay, teachers must attend in-service trainings. The Department of Education provided them trainings in teaching English, trainings in teaching Filipino, math, science, etc. And so they have to attend so that they could develop in themselves language growth, and at the same time professional growth. Provide assistance or prepare instructional materials. If there are problems with instructional materials, especially in the areas where it's a bit difficult to bring materials because of um, they're too far, so sometimes the teacher must be resourceful and creative and prepare instructional materials for their students. uh, as I mentioned a while ago, there are more reading materials in English than in Filipino. So if teachers are really serious in teaching Filipino language to their students, then they have to devise instructional materials um, for their students so that they could bridge the gap between the scarcity in the materials in English and in Filipino. Or if they are good in translation, they can translate stories uh, so that the students would have something to read at, okay, in school. Display competency in English and or Filipino language. So it's important that teachers would have to display competency. You may wonder how we prepare our pre-service teachers to teach English or Filipino uh, in the college. Actually, we do not have bilingual education course, or we do not teach bilingual education, but instead, because we have a separate and a very distinct function for English and Filipino, even in the College of Education, we offer courses uh, in Filipino or in English as separate subjects or a separate specialization, math, science, etc. So if a student would take Bachelor of Science in Secondary Education major in English, so the student is being prepared to teach subjects, English subjects, in from junior high school to senior high school. So which means if this student will graduate and become teacher in a public school, let's say, she should be able to teach uh, any of the English subjects offered from junior high to senior high, because that's the kind of preparation we provide them in the college. Okay, they're not supposed to teach Filipino language because the preparation is in English. The same for the Filipino majors. um, all of their subjects are Filipino, related to Filipino language, the teaching of Filipino, assessment in Filipino, uh, the content aspect of Filipino language is also taught to them. So our preparation is content and pedagogy, how to teach the language and what to teach. So in the event that they go to the school to teach on their own, so they should be ready to teach any subject because they've been prepared to do that. Um, in our case, because we have a new curriculum in the college, the curriculum was adjusted based on the need of the Department of Education. Since the Department of Education transitioned to K to 12, so there's also a need for the tertiary, for the teacher education program to align its courses so that we could meet the need of the Department of Education, because we are the provider. We provide them the teachers. So our teachers should be ready to teach in the K to 12 curriculum. So the K to 12 is heavy on literature. That's why our curriculum now is heavy on literature. And we also provide them teaching strategies and assessment strategies on all aspects of the English language, even um, the different language policies uh, in the country are being taught to them, so that they would understand why there's a shift in the policy, because they have to go back to how it started, what were the curriculum before the K to 12, and why do we have this kind of curriculum in the present time. So those are the preparations we do. That's why when our students would go in the field, they are uh, inherently bilingual because they were taught Filipino language in subjects where Filipino is required. At the same time, they were taught English language because this is their specialization. Okay. But when they are in the field, they are free to use Filipino language. We're not very strict to, oh, you have to only use English language. No, it's just that that's their specialization. That's where they are good at, and that's where they are trained to be an expert. And later on, when they take their masters, they will also take the same specialization. So they will take masters of English education, major in English. Still, they will major in English. Okay, so the bilingual policy, no matter how successful it could be, there will be some areas where it actually needed some uh, checkup. Okay, some investigations. The children or the learners are our main clientele, but still, some students or some children suffer from the bilingual education policy. I'm saying that not all children will benefit from a bilingual education policy. So one challenge that was noted by many researches conducted as regards the implementation of bilingual education is what we call the academic marginalization. It simply means that um, the Tagalog speaking children are in an are put in a very good position, which means they are given more advantage as compared to the non-Tagalog speaking children. Why? Because when the children whose first language is Tagalog, when they go to school, the medium of instruction will be Filipino and English. So with Filipino language, they just need to enhance that language because it's their mother tongue. So they only need to learn English in the school. Learning English alone is already difficult. What more if you have to learn two new languages at the same time, which is the case of the non-Tagalog speaking children. And therefore, it's more struggle, more difficulties encountered by the children whose first language is not Tagalog, because they don't speak Filipino at home. They speak their mother tongue in their day-to-day conversation. So when they go to school, Filipino is a new language. English is also a new language. Uh, that's why there is academic marginalization in that aspect. Um, we could also see that their academic performance could be affected because of uh, these lack of knowledge or familiarization with the two languages in the classroom. But teachers are very resourceful. Um, if the students would find it difficult to learn Filipino and English, they translate. And instead of teaching, for example, using English, for example, they use the mother tongue of the students so that they could teach the content subjects such as math and science. They cannot force English because it's something difficult for the students. So teachers would translate, and that was when the mother tongue based multilingual education was actually recognized because of the effort of many teachers who use mother tongue in teaching their students instead of using English in the primary grades. So mother tongue is actually not a policy that will replace bilingual education. It's a language that emerged from bilingual education. You would see from the image that there's a tree. The old tree is actually the bilingual education, and a new sprout has emerged, and that is the multilingual or the MTB MLE. It there's a new life from the old tree. So this MTB-MLE was implemented in 2012 under Department Order 16, series of 2012 as part of the K to 12 curriculum on basic education. So when the K to 12 curriculum was implemented, um, the MTB-MLE was also implemented in the basic education. So the argument is that pupils learn best through the primary or home languages that they bring to school. This is based on research conducted by the UNESCO and the Department of Education. They did experimental research. In some areas where Tagalog language is not very popular or not very common, so they tried to use the mother tongue in teaching the students. So one group used the mother tongue, whereas the other group used Filipino or English. And in their achievement test, those students who were taught in the mother tongue scored better than the other group of students. And these experimental study did not only happen in one region. In fact, they tried it in some areas as well, and they found it effective for those children who were in the experimental group. That's why they believe that MTB MLE will uh, show that learning among Filipino children in school is facilitated best through the mother tongues. But where is this mother tongue based multilingual education come from? It's actually from one of the provisions of bilingual education. One of the provisions is regional languages shall be used as auxiliary languages in grades 1 and 2. In the MTB MLE, it was only strengthened. It was not a new policy after all. It was just strengthened, and it actually um, written in the policy itself. But this time, it is implemented in the whole country. So BEP and MTB MLEs run simultaneously in the current Philippine education. Okay, so from kindergarten to grade 3, um, there's the use of regional or native tongue in instruction, education, and teaching materials and assessment. So the medium of instruction is in the mother tongue. And then when they reach grade 4, there will be a gradual transition. So from mother tongue, slowly the teacher will introduce Filipino and English as the medium of instruction until such time that the students are familiar with the two languages and they become the primary means of instruction uh, when they reach grade 5 to grade 6. And then high school, it's going to be pure English and Filipino and up to college level. So this is now the current trend in our educational system as regards the language policies. So bilingual education was not replaced. It was only um, there was only an addition so that it could help students whose language is not Tagalog. But there are some issues regarding this mother tongue, uh, the choice of mother tongue. Okay, so these are the preliminary challenges. Number one, lack of instructional materials. Uh, so it's given that because you have to translate materials in different languages. So it's given that there will be problem with instructional materials. Okay, so the department must hire a lot of writers, um, using speakers of the language to be able to come up with instructional materials. So these are the preliminary challenges, because after the implementation, there were some uh, studies conducted. So these are some of the results of the studies. So probably slowly the department is addressing the challenges. Number two, the teacher's language competency. Okay. If you uh, if you're the teacher who will handle um, mother tongue, then you have to be competent in that language. But the problem is, if the teacher uh, was not born in that area, or let's say the teacher just relocated, so she's not familiar with the language at all. So these are some of the problems that emerge as they were implementing the mother tongue based curriculum. Luckily, I don't teach in the elementary. So I don't have to worry about even if it's your mother tongue, it's different when you have to teach it. Okay, it's not the same as when you use it to talk to people as compared when you have to teach it as a language in the classroom. But trainings were given to the teachers who will handle mother tongue, but probably it wasn't enough uh, to make them competent. But we will get there slowly. Okay. Number three, the exclusion of other languages in the policy. There were 170 languages in the first year of the implementation of the MTBMLE. There were only 8 languages included in the curriculum. Okay, the 8 were the major languages, and then in 2016 there were an addition of 11 languages, so making it 19. But still, many groups, they're not happy with the 19. They feel that the 19 languages um, will not represent the 170 languages we have. So that could actually be another point of discussion. Uh, the Department of Education is actually working on these different challenges to address the problems raised by the teachers, the parents, the community regarding the curriculum. But it's too early to judge whether the program is going to be a failure or successful. Just like your plan to have a full bilingual education by 2030, right? But we have to keep moving forward despite the challenges that we encounter, because the purpose that we have set for the policy will eventually um, become beneficial for all our learners. After all, we created the policy for the learners, and it's supposed to be beneficial for them. So we should not be disheartened by the challenges we encounter, but instead we have to work on the challenges so that we can better our policy for our country. Okay, so with that, I would like to end my talk with a very simple quote, which says the benefits of being bilingual go beyond the ability to communicate in another language. Instead, it gives our kids a broader perspective of the world. So when we introduce to them another language, we actually introduce a different world that they have not seen before. So let's give it to them. And we try. We have to try. Okay, so thank you very much or salamat sa inyong lahat.
Salamat. Thank you so much, Professor Talabut. This is so interesting. I have learned so much. Thank you for introducing and sharing the chronicle history of bilingual language policy in the Philippines and your thoughts, and also the challenges. And it's really amazing. And I'm quite surprised. First of all, I think we're your right now your focus is like localization,
Yes,
uh, yeah, because of the American, um, uh, when they were
when they
when
when they colonized.
yeah, Philippine being colonized by the United States. So English was, the language in public school. So right now you're going, from globalization of the English as a lingua franca, but toward localization, promoting Filipino, and learning more about your local languages,
Yes.
and that's just amazing. And so I was having, a lot of I asking a lot of questions in the chat, and I'm really thankful that Dr. Bolinas was able
Yes.
to answer all of my questions. And
Actually,
I
I saw some of the questions popping in, and I would always see Dr. Balinas answering the questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Yay. But I like to, we still have some time, and I like to give this chance to the audience if any, we have, right now we have 82 participants, but earlier we have 90, up to 92 or 95. Thank you for being here. Would you like to open up your mic and, ask any questions? This would be a great chance to ask questions if you have any questions for Remy.
Or maybe some insights that you would like to share.
Yeah. hmm We have a lot of teachers from different parts of Taiwan, and I see 佳慧老师. She's an English teacher in Taipei.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it, okay. Per, okay. So if you have any questions, please do raise your hand. We have one question in the chat from Xi Ping. How do teachers evaluate students' performance?
The K to 12 curriculum included the assessment part. So the students are assessed. They have their formative assessment, their summative assessment, and their performance tasks. So the K to 12 curriculum has included as well the correct assessment or the proper assessment for as regards the standards that they have to meet. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so that's how the assessment is done.
Mm-hmm. So in addition to that, when you said that kids are learning math and science and English, and they're still learning math and science and English right now, right?
Yes, yes.
Starting from, is it, do they start from third grade, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. So the assessment would be in English for these two subject areas. Was there a particular reason why science and math is chosen to be taught in English?
I think because of the achievement test that they
Mm-hmm.
have to take,
Mm-hmm.
because I think the Philippines applied for the English language
Mm-hmm.
in PISA and TIMS, and
Mm-hmm.
so they have to be taught in English so that they would be able to take those examinations in English, and
I see.
those are subjects that are, I think, more important
Uh,
because everywhere you go, you have to people use English in mathematics, and it's difficult to translate concepts in Filipino.
mm-hmm.
Actually, my niece, who was part of the K to 12 program. She started her mathematics in the mother tongue,
Mhm.
and it was very difficult to understand the concepts when they are stated in the Philippine language. They I cannot understand. She was asking me, what is the meaning of this? I could not understand it. It's easier when it's in English
Oh, wow. So
because
so is so her home language is what is her home language? Like their mother
um,
tongue.
in Pampanga, where we live, our mother tongue is Kapampangan.
Uh-huh.
However, because many of the children no longer speak Kapampangan, and many uh, uh, I think families coming from Manila or
Mhm.
the nearby areas chose to stay in Pampanga.
Mhm.
So Kapampangan is no longer widely
Mhm.
spoken,
Mhm.
especially for the young generation. And so
Mhm.
they have chosen Tagalog as
Mhm.
the mother tongue.
Uh-huh. So Tagalog. Oh, okay. Sorry. Dr. Balinas, you
Sorry,
would you like to say?
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, is
Please
Mom
go
Remy
ahead.
done
Yes.
with her explanation? I'm
Yes,
so
ma'am.
sorry. I just raised my hand. Yeah, I would just like to add on the
Mhm.
reason why we prioritize the use of English in the teaching of mathematics and
Mhm.
science, primarily because we do not have enough materials
Mhm.
in Filipino and in the mother tongue
Mhm.
to teach these courses. So
Mhm.
we have a variety of materials for
Mhm.
these subjects, but they are all written in English. So
Mhm.
aside from the fact that we have applied English as the medium of um, the language for this particular examinations,
Mhm.
which is why it's quite a challenge for us to produce materials written in Filipino for
I
this
see.
subjects, science and mathematics. And we even have controversies as
Mhm.
regards the correct term to
Mhm.
to translate the concepts in math and in
Science.
English.
Mhm.
So also, Dr. Chen, I
Mhm.
saw a question here, but Mom Remy could, but I could not. Sorry, I just wanted to share that. I
Yes.
wonder if technology plays a key role in the bilingual education there. I would just like to share because of the pandemic, Dr. Chen, the public school system or the Department of Education in the Philippines were forced to innovate. No, the schools were forced to innovate. So I would say that even if we're quite limited as far as technology is
Mhm.
concerned in the public schools,
Mhm.
uh, they they were able to produce Filipino
Mhm.
instructional materials
Mhm.
um, in the e-format. So they make use of comic books to teach mathematics. So
Mm.
I have seen this because there was a call for an innovation conference in
Mhm.
our region
Mhm.
last 2 weeks ago.
Mhm.
And I was part of the panel of evaluators there, and I was amazed
Mhm.
because they were able to convert their written modules in the e format, like comics books, teaching mathematics using comic books, and then they also made use of television,
Mhm.
television based instruction.
Mhm.
So both are used. Both languages are used, Filipino
Mhm.
and in English.
Mhm.
So, and then they also have radio-based instruction as well, to address the challenge of the pandemic, because we have no face-to-face instruction as yet. No,
Yeah.
so the president is perhaps thinking of implementing limited face-to-face instruction, but
Mhm.
we're not yet there. And
Mhm.
so the public school systems are forced to innovate.
Mhm.
So modular instruction
Mhm.
using the physical copies of the materials too expensive. So
Mhm.
we have learned the lesson last year. So
Mhm.
we have spent millions producing these materials, and of course it's not it's not friendly, environmental friendly, right? Using a
Mhm.
lot of papers.
Mhm.
But so what did was to innovate, made use of TV-based instruction,
Mhm.
radio-based instruction, comics
Mhm.
books, right?
Mhm.
And then comics in e-format as well.
Mhm.
So and then using the on-the-go flash drive, no,
Mhm.
to distribute to these learners. But the same thing,
Mhm.
both languages are used, no,
Mhm.
in the implementation of this learning delivery mode.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, because of the pandemic, we really need to improvise and create e-learning materials for the students, and um, um, we also have like local teachers teaching in English and broadcasting them on YouTube channels for the students as well. Um, we also have another question in the chat. I think earlier from Jing Hao Chow. Filipino and English, which one is has priority in your policy? Because it's but Dr. Bolinas has answered that the goal is to achieve competence in both languages. And do you think that most learners have achieved competence in both languages? And that's one of our concern right now because our push for bilingual nation, a lot of scholars are worried that we might be um, you know, losing our own mother tongue, like Mandarin Chinese. I mean, the use of it, and because we're doing the opposite because we're promoting English, and so we're in a primary school. We're teaching, um, life sciences, music, PE, and in English, um, and science starting from third grade. We're only beginning to try to teach science in English, but we're very hesitant about it because science concepts are difficult. And so we were quite amazed that science and math are taught in English in the Philippines. Yes. So yeah. Is there a priority in the policy, or I guess um, uh, Professor Talabut? Yeah, we can't hear you.
In the policy, it's very clear that more subjects are actually taught in Filipino, but
Mhm.
the instructional materials are more in English than in Filipino.
Mhm.
It's a bit ironic, right?
Mhm.
Even in the curriculum,
Mhm.
there's more uh, opportunity to learn English more than
Mhm.
Filipino, but we never lose those subjects that will teach the Filipino students the subject. And we have actually we even have we celebrate Buwan ng Wika. It's a month-long celebration of
Mhm.
the Filipino language
Mhm.
in order to uh, strengthen the Filipino and never, to introduce it and
Mhm.
to keep ourselves rooted in our
Mhm.
language.
Mhm.
So I think the government is doing its best to keep Filipino at par with English,
Mhm.
but the demands of globalization
Yes.
makes us want to strive harder to learn English
Mhm.
because we want to become part of the world,
Mhm.
and we cannot deny the fact that English is important.
Mhm.
So as long as we have our subjects in the educational
Mhm.
system. We teach the language, we celebrate.
Mhm.
Um, Mass media still use Filipino language. So
Mhm.
I think there's still a balance. But in
Mhm.
the education, um, English is more, I think, prioritized.
Mhm. Thank you. We still have one more question, or two more. Um, from Shen Jiahui 老师 from Tianmu Guoxiao. In Taiwan
Mhm.
policy, we're going to be a bilingual country in the year 2030. Many teachers here are trained to be bilingual teachers in science. Do you have any suggestions for us in terms
Uh,
of teaching or an assessment?
Rems, is Jarrett, Dr. Jarrett here?
yes, actually, I
Oh,
wanted
yeah.
Yeah.
I wanted to promote the next webinar, which is
Yes.
teaching science,
Yeah, I
teaching
think he's
science in
here.
English.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
Sir
should be
Jerry
able.
is
Sir Ja, are you here?
Hi.
Yeah, I
the
think
better
Yes,
yeah,
person.
there.
you should be able to answer this question. Yes.
Yeah, good
Dr.
morning,
Jarrett is a
everyone.
science teacher.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yes, Sir Ja.
Before handling courses in the university, I was able to teach in the basic education. I handled science courses
Mm-hmm.
for like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the most difficult thing in teaching science in English is how the teacher would be able to communicate with the students. I have no doubt that the science teachers would have expertise in terms of content. They know what to teach. However, how do they get the ideas across to their students? If the target is to become a bilingual teacher by 2030, starting from now, I think the best suggestion that I can give is start conversations among science teachers. They need to talk with each other, form groups where they can start talking about scientific concepts in English. I know you are very much confident discussing these terms, discussing these ideas. You can have hours and hours of discussions about science if you are using your native language. But this is another challenge that we have to take. How do we how do we get all of these rich discussions using another language? In terms of assessment, if we are really gearing towards delivering the instruction in English, we need to also train our teachers how to prepare assessment tools, reading materials that are in English. Um, it's a matter of exposure. In the Philippines, as early as grade 3, when science is introduced into the class, it's already taught in English. Just like what Ma'am Remy mentioned a while ago, while there is no separate subject for science in grades 1 and 2, the concepts of science are integrated in the English courses, in the English subjects of the students. In this way, students are gradually exposed to different terminologies, different ideas, and they are somewhat unconsciously given an environment which would somehow promote them using English language to express themselves. However, what happens outside the classroom is a different situation. It's a different story. So maybe we could discuss more of that during the next webinar. Thank you very much.
A good to
Thank you.
promote. Good way to
Yes, thank
promote.
you so much, Dr.
Thank you
Tayag.
very much.
Yeah. So yeah, we're coming to the the end of the session, and I'm really thankful for Professor Talabut and also Dr. Bolinas and Dr. Tayag um, for sharing your thoughts on bilingual language policy in the Philippines. And I am certain that the participants has gained valuable insights that they can use for their current and future endeavors. And for the participants, kindly note that we will send you an email containing the survey from today's webinar. Kindly answer it and send it back through email. So we will have this information to help you find ways to serve you better in the future. Um, yeah, in the end, I would like to take this opportunity to invite you to our next webinar on teaching science in English to be led by Dr. Jaran Tayag, Program Chair of Teacher Education at Angeles University Foundation, Philippines. I'm very excited as well. The webinar will be held on October 23rd from 10 o'clock to 11:30 a.m. To register, please scan the QR code shown on your screen. Okay. Once again, thank you for joining us today in today's webinar, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Let me
you.
stop
Thank
presenting.
you, Dr. Jane.
Thank you, Dr. Bolinas. Thank you, Professor Talabut. And see you next month, Dr.
Yes.
Tayag.
See you. I'm excited.
Dr.
Yay, I'm so
Jane,
excited.
Dr.
Yes,
Jane,
yes, yes.
I am interested with
Yeah.
the the TESOL that you mentioned,
Yeah.
because my proposed dissertation is on Minecraft. I
Oh, that
read
would be
your
great.
I read your research
Oh,
online.
wonderful. Please submit your abstract.
Yeah.
That's what I
Yes.
told Remy. Remy, you have to send your
Yeah.
proposal,
That
your
would be that
paper.
would be wonderful. And join us on Evo, a Minecraft MOOC this coming January.
Wow. All
Welcome to
right.
our Evo team. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jane, and see you
Thank you,
next
Dr.
month.
Bolinas. See you next
Yes.
month. See you, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you
I'll
for
keep in
joining
touch. I'll
us.
keep in touch as regards the schedule,
Okay.
Dr. Jane.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
because
Thank
we will
you.
have you in February, right? Next
Yes.
year. Yes. Yeah. So
Thank you.
excited
And
as well. Thank you
I'm
so
so
much.
excited as well. Thank you so much, Dr.
Yes. Thank
Bolinas.
you. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.
Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye
Bye.
bye. Bye.